Afternoon, Facebook. This is Debby Enoe from Teacher Success Coach for another day of the Female Educators Roundtable with two of my hosts, Christine and Tanya. Can you introduce yourself to my Facebook audience, please?
Okay, I'll go. My name is Christy Emmanuel. I'm from Nigeria. Okay, I teach in a private school. The kids are between the ages of 7 and 10, and I teach English language here in Nigeria. Yes.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm from Italy and I teach in a school in the Middle East. I teach chemistry in high school and I've been teaching for almost 19 years.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. On the platform, as I've said previously, we are looking at the challenges and triumphs of teaching on or offline during COVID-19. As we know, COVID-19 is the teaching setup is very unusual. It's what I see as our new normal. So as a result of that, as educators, we had to be very flexible. We had to be very innovative. We also had to be thinking on our feet a lot more than we normally do. So what we are looking at today is some of the barriers which are experienced on the online platform. So for example, what the barriers there the educators might have experienced. It could be communication, it could be lack of attendance, it could be resources. Oh my goodness, there's a whole host of barriers. So they're going to share with us some of the barriers that they have experienced and how they actually overcame the barriers and whether or not what aspect of that they're going to be taking into the classroom, if at all. They might decide to leave it where it is. So, we're going to be sharing some of the barriers. Okay, so one of the questions is, what are some of the barriers that you have experienced in relationship to communication during the online platform? The reason why I looked at communication is a big factor because communication also leads to connection. And if you're not able to communicate, you are not able to connect with your student. As an educator, myself, we know that very well. So we'll have to find various strategies to ensure that the communication is there and we're able to somehow communicate with the students, because we also know that one of the factors is, they could decide not to turn up at all on the online platform, or they could be turning off and switching off the camera. You're stuck. In the classroom, there's no way they could do that because you're right next to them. You could actually prompt them, okay, I see that you're not communicating, what's the problem? But online, you're talking to a screen. And I'm sure you guys have a lot to tell us. Anybody take it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead, Christy.
Okay, so like you earlier said, communication is a two-way thing. Okay, there has to be someone who is passing across the message, and you're going to be sure that the other person at the other end, is getting what message you're passing across. So like you earlier identified, it's kind of new because you're just talking to the screen and you don't know if the person on the other side is actually listening or just looking at the screen and just getting distracted by something by the side. So it was quite a challenge because communication is not only when a child responds yes or no, their body language also helps you know if they are getting what you're telling them. Their facial expressions, some might put up their camera, so you don't really know, and what of kids who have special, who are special, maybe they have some hearing aids or, hearing disability, or probably they have some visual impairment and things like that. So getting across to them is quite challenging. So for me, I had to become a little bit creative by calling to action every now and then to be sure that these children are actually following, and then making instructions as brief as possible, as clear as possible, as simple as possible, so that I can sustain their attention while communicating with them. So it was challenging, but as teachers, we're always very creative. We always find a way around whatever it is that is placed before you.
Yeah, I agree with you. We have to create, we had to suddenly be experts in this situation, which is so unprecedented. Like in my subject in chemistry, we tend to do practicals. The kids, every student has to do at least one practical a week. So it was difficult. And as you say, you don't know, are the kids watching? Are they just logged in and have they walked away? So I tried to maintain a level of interaction with students similar to the classroom. Because I prefer the no hands up rule, so that I can select a student randomly and say, well, what do you think about this? Or have you had a look at this? And I implemented that online. But one of my challenges was my internet connection. It was absolutely terrible. So there would be situations where either I had bad internet or the students had bad internet, and they would be lagging and you'd be trying to speak, and they can't hear you. So you don't know, are they genuinely not hearing you, or are they just using that as an excuse, you know? And there'd be times when students would be late to the lesson and say, oh, I couldn't log in. And I think we had to develop a level of trust with our students as well. We had to allow for that, you know, we had to basically say, right, I'm here, I'm doing this, it's for your benefit. And I'm quite blessed to have some really good students. So luckily I didn't have many bad experiences, but I've heard of many colleagues who've had situations where students were taking advantage of the fact that maybe the teacher wasn't an expert and couldn't manage the screen or the sound or the microphone being muted and whatnot. So it kind of just, you know, you have to make the most of what you can. And as for the practical side of things, the students were themselves very sad because they had to now watch videos of other people having done these experiments, hoping that they will get an opportunity to do these experiments in future. You know, so it's been tough. It's been up and down.
Yeah, thank you. One of the challenge I had was sharing my screen. Oh my goodness. I did not know how to share the screen. It took me a good 10 minutes trying to negotiate how to share the screen. I couldn't find the button. You know, I was told, okay, press whatever. I still couldn't share the screen. It took me a long time to share that screen. The time you share the screen, there's sometimes you start losing the attention of the students.
Right.
You see, so that was a challenge. But as we all know, if we actually had to do a micro lesson on that during our training, we would know exactly what button to press to share the screen. You know, if we had lessons on that, we'll know what to do. But not having any lessons, never knew anything about Zoom before, just had to do Zoom now. And it's like, oh my goodness, you know, it's one thing doing the PowerPoints, it's the other thing having to share the screen. You know,
It's
so
been
it
a
was
huge
challenge.
learning curve.
Yeah.
And the expectation from many parents seem to be that, you know, you're the teacher, you should know exactly how to do all of this online. And, you know, we are only human and there's only so much that we know. But I think professional development will definitely change as a result of this situation globally. I think most schools around the world will begin to start training their staff a lot more on online, because that's the way to the future, isn't it, ultimately?
Yeah, sure it is. It is.
Yeah. The thing about it is, every industry, I say that in all my sessions, every industry have moved, you know, in terms of electronically, except in academic field in schools.
Sure.
You know, in terms of the online platform, we shouldn't even be having a problem, because that should have been, we should be having, you know, professional development on that. But we were not given the training, so therefore we thought there was no need to do that. The fact that everything else have been moving, there should have also be the thoughts from the powers that be that area also need to be moving. We should not have been stuck, because we're living in an electronic age.
Yeah.
And it's quite sad that, you know, the only time they think of giving us in is when we've actually trained ourselves.
I think a lot of schools talk about technology, but technology is always used to add to your teaching. So you might use, people think that using a PowerPoint in a lesson is technology, you know, and we're talking on a completely different level now of technology. I'm quite lucky because my school had already trained most of us on the Google apps, and we already have an online system in terms of our homework. So we put everything on Google Classroom. So our students know how to use Google Classroom. And that came in extremely handy at a time like this. So teachers who weren't using Google Classroom regularly were now making sure that Google Classroom had to be up to date, because all our students had access to that, luckily, before all of this came, kicked off. So for the last couple of years, we've been using Google Apps, and all of our students have Chromebooks. So that is fantastic, because then the excuse could only be, I broke my Chromebook, or I've lost it, or I'm in a foreign country on vacation and I don't have it. But generally, most kids were able to access their Chromebook and therefore access the lesson. I think it's important to consider situations where schools that don't have these kind of things, how were they expecting their students to now suddenly be able to access online education in an equal manner, in a way that would be fair to all the students and wouldn't be differentiating from, in terms of students who may own their own laptop and others who may not, or may not be able to afford it. So I think these are all things to be looking at in future as well.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that. Especially from my own end here, the experience is quite different, because most teachers here are just stuck with the classroom thing, one-on-one. Okay, so when this came up, everybody was a bit overwhelmed, kind of confused. As I speak to you, there are a lot of schools that have not reopened, whether online or offline, so they don't really know how to go about it. And the few that were able to come on still having challenges. Why? Because they just had to be there, to hold on with the kids and not let them stay without having to do anything. So it's a big challenge. And then come to think of it, if you're studying like a teacher, you want to be an English teacher, or let's say agric or something, computer studies or IT is not kind of incorporated. So it feels like it's not your line, it's not important, so they just leave it for the computer students or IT students or teachers who want to go into that line. So it kind of makes it very difficult to incorporate, with the new system or the new normal now for most teachers. I think it would be a great idea if the government here and across the world can actually incorporate that and make it one of the things you have to go through as a teacher to be IT compliant, as to be able to, meet up with situations like this. Not that we expect, things like this to be happening, but if going online will be the future of education, then we might as well get ourselves ready.
I totally agree with that. What other barriers have you guys been experiencing?
Well, having to cooperate with the parents too was a bit of a challenge, because you'll agree with me that most of them have been overwhelmed with what has been happening. Some lost their jobs, some are still trying to put up with the new normal, how to, go out and fend for the family and things like that. So sometimes their attention are not fully given to, the schoolwork or whatever activities you've given to the kids or assignments. So it kind of made it a bit difficult, though some of them had to come to terms with, what is now happening. So they will lend you a few hours. Some of them are actually working from home. So you can imagine combining having to look at the kids' work and then working from home also. So that was another thing that played out. But eventually, I think it's beginning to sink. Parents are also beginning to learn from this experience that the education of their children is also in their own hands. So they don't have to leave it all out to the teachers like it used to be. And they just think that you know it all, you can figure it out, it's your work, you're paid to do it. and stuff like this. So now it's giving them another sense of direction that they too also have a role to play in their kids' education.
I agree with that. Another challenge I was thinking of was also how impersonal online teaching is. I think we were talking about this earlier about how in a classroom you can talk to a student, you can read their body language, you can see if they're not well, if they're worried. And with all this anxiety and stress due to COVID-19, we are here on a screen unable to support our students emotionally as we would have normally been able to or wanted to in the classroom. So that's an aspect. And I think it kind of connects well with what you're saying, because you've got parents anxious, losing jobs, not knowing what's going to happen, trying to support their kids, but not really giving them the attention. And then you've got teachers that are far away, distant, impersonal. Some teachers didn't interact very much. You know, maybe they just showed a screen and talked to the screen, or they muted their students, or whatever, like all the different ways. So students, a lot of youngsters found themselves detached and unable to really talk about what was worrying them, because they felt that the problems of the adults must be more serious than their problems. And yet, you know, you've got, I mean, I had AS students worrying about their exam results and their university applications, but I also had, you know, younger students. One of my younger students actually asked me at the end of a lesson, I said, you know, does anyone have any questions? And I said, even if they're not related to chemistry, like give them a little bit of downtime to ask. And one of my 12 or 13-year-olds actually said, Miss, is the world ending? You know, and I said, of course it's not. So I had to reassure this child, but I realized this was an unsaid question that they were all thinking, well, what's happening? Is this like the end? And it's not. There have been pandemics in the past with completely different logistics in terms of travel and communication. So we have, you know, a few obstacles that we need to pass, but I had to tell them, no, everything will be okay. It will. Don't worry. But, you know, and of course, we don't know if they have relatives or parents or people who are sick. So the whole interaction, I felt that was something that as a teacher, you interact with kids daily, you feel really helpless because you can't. There's no way, you know, a class of 25 or 30 kids that you would be able to give that kind of online attention. And you're not necessarily seeing the video of all of them, you know. So if the videos are off and all you hear is voices, you don't really know. It's very impersonal. That was definitely a challenge. You're muted, Debbie. You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. What did I say to you guys? Right. Do any of you allow the students, or how are you in relationship to students actually switching off the cameras?
Can you
So
take
in
that
my
again?
okay, go on. Okay, so in my school, generally the rule was for safeguarding that you don't ask the students to turn their camera on. If they want to, they can. Some teachers strictly said no, others said it was fine. I allowed it, you know, but obviously I told them that I expected them to be sitting somewhere talking to me. It's not like they can be in bed asleep, you know, half asleep or whatever. No, so there was that expectation. So some students were connected on a desk, which they clearly had in their home. Other students didn't. But I made sure that they all interacted with me, especially when I took the register. I said I needed to hear them respond. I needed to know they were there. So if they use the excuse that their mic is not working, I said, that's fine, because you can type. So I said, if I call you out and you're not typing and you're not speaking, I will assume you're not there. So that made sure that most of them interacted, basically.
Right. I think that's a good idea. Christy?
Yeah, sure. It was, like she said, it wasn't compulsory. You could let your camera on or you could put it out. You know, being online, it's another way of intruding into someone's privacy. So you really didn't know if that was okay with the person or not, okay with their parents or not. So it was optional. You could put it on or you could put it off. But either way, it would have made sense more if you could actually see all, their kids and all the kids and their faces, and to see their expression while you communicated with them. But all the same, we tried to make it very interactive. So there was always call to action every now and then to be sure that the kids are with you. So it was optional.
Okay, okay.
And for me, I also know that
Nothing serious about it.
like for the first 2.5 months, I kept my camera on. So I would get up in the morning, get dressed, and I would sit in front of my screen. And I made sure that they could see me because I knew that that was important to them.
Yeah.
The last 2 weeks of teaching were a bit more difficult. So I took the screen, I didn't connect my camera. And the students actually asked, and they said, "Miss, can we see you?" So I realized that that was letting them feel a level of connection, which was
right.
important. And they told me about some teachers who never had the camera on. So some teachers they've not seen since February. Or some teachers who just taught via shared screen or PowerPoint or video, and so they never actually interacted. And the kids really missed that because they were missing school. They were missing their social interactions very much.
I think that is also owing to the fact that some people, like some of us, were not really used to talking to the screen. So there was this anxiety, a kind of pressure. How do I look? How am I coming along? I don't know how I look on camera. Oh, I've not done this before. So there's so much pressure. Some would like to put their cameras off just to feel comfortable. But like you said, putting it on was, the best thing at the time, because it helped, the kids connect with you. They can actually reach you physically, but they cannot always see your face and, see how you are cutting across, how you are smiling, how you are communicating, your body language, and all of those can help, put across whatever message you're trying to share. So leaving it on for the educator is quite
the only thing that kind of got me thinking a couple of times was, when you teach online, ultimately you are your personality. However you teach in the class is the same way you speak to the kids online. So if you're used to speaking to the students with respect, that will carry on. And if you're not, then and I kept thinking sometimes my students like to joke, and we have a bit of a sense of humor and whatnot. And I thought, I wonder if there's any parents sitting there, because I don't know who's sitting next to my students. Some of them had earphones, but who knows? So I wonder if the parents are thinking, wow, is this how you interact in class? Because that's, as a teacher, you feel a little bit under pressure, like thinking, I've got parents now looking at me, possibly judging the way that I'm answering questions, if I'm answering clearly or not, and all of that. It was a bit, that was something to think about.
Yeah, that is true. Another thing, I had some educators were saying to me that they wanted all the students to have the camera on. My argument with that is that sometimes the living environment is not conducive to having the camera on. The situation where the student might feel embarrassed in terms of what is likely in the background. The student might be sharing a room or sharing a space. So the fact that this camera is on, it means that, the student is actually exposing themselves to some of the peers that have never seen that aspect of them. So that is something I was saying to some educators, need to be mindful, because as much as I understand that when the camera is not on, it becomes a barrier, we also have to be mindful of what's going on with the students in their environment. Why they're not putting the camera on, because we also have some educators that are refusing to put their camera on because, a fear of, or I had someone say to me, oh, well, I don't want them to come into my living room. I understand that, but it depends on how anxious you are to communicate with the students. I think it is far more important that we put our camera on, so they could actually connect with us than we pressure them to put their camera on.
Yeah.
Because I think they need to, the fact that we are the role model, we are the leaders, we are the innovators. It's nice that they could actually see us. They could actually see that, we're smiling, because that might be the only thing they're connecting with all day.
Yeah, right.
So that's for me. Yes, it's a barrier when the camera is not on, but a matter of mindfulness in relationship to the factors that's going on in the background.
Yeah.
Because they might have young siblings who might be jumping on the settee, who might be, sharing that same space. There's so many other factors.
They did. I ended up hearing a baby cry once in the background while my student was answering a question. And then my student said, well, actually, my family, my parents have just had a baby. And so this is my little sibling. So there are so many situations we have to be aware of and understanding too.
Yeah. So, all that could be barriers in terms of how we are going to communicate with the students. However, as educators, we need to be thinking outside the box as how we are going to negotiate those barriers and what we're going to do, etc. Another thing I had from some educators, this was just through a chat in relationship to it's interesting, Tanya, that you're saying the internet. One session, I think was last week, I did not come on until late because my internet was not cooperating with me. And it was a whole half an hour. And it was really good because the two educators were still hanging on there with me. I had to switch off, so we also know one of the biggest barrier can be the internet. And in England, I find the internet is all over the place. There's sometimes, you are desperate and it's not happening. So that's one of the big barriers. That sometimes there's nothing you could do because you cannot overcome that barrier because it's the internet.
Right. Exactly. I think for most parents here, that's one of the things they're battling with. They were not used to having to budget for internet extra, to have their kids learn online. So that became a huge challenge on their own part. Another challenge was, even if you had the internet, sometimes power supply was a bit bad, so you couldn't actually connect. Let's say your PC was down, or you had internet but it's bad, you can't connect at the time, or your service provider was not just coming on. So all of these things put together, I have had parents call to say, my kid will not be joining in today, the internet is not cooperating, or we don't have lights at home, or my PC is down, my child can't join in. All of those put together, and then where you have lag, even when the children join in and you're talking, there's a lag. You would have finished a sentence before they hear it. So sometimes when they respond, it's like there's a bridge. You can't completely, the back and forth communication is just somehow disjointed. So it's a big one. I mean, it's something most educators had to battle with, and probably still battling with for some who are still online, teaching the kids.
That's why I think it was really important to share the resources with the students, I made sure, I mean, this was our policy as well. We had to make sure everything was posted online. So everything was posted in Google Classroom, and anything that the students may have missed that could be useful was also passed on to them. So they had access to it in their own time, because even if their internet wasn't working properly to attend the lesson, they could still do the work, access that, email you and get back to you and, complete. So I guess as educators, we had to make sure, we can't control our own connection either. So we just had to make sure that we were organized enough for people to be able to function regardless of the connection being up and down. And that was quite difficult, because that in itself is a very stressful situation to be in. I mean, going to school, we rely on our own selves. So if you're in a classroom and your PowerPoint just suddenly doesn't work, as a teacher, you've always got things up your sleeve, so you can save the day. But if that's your only method of teaching, then you're pretty much stuck, because you're thinking, oh no, I can't log in. That's it, no lesson today. But we can't do that. So we had to organize ourselves by posting. I posted information before the lesson so students could access it and discuss it with me. And I always posted the work after as well. So they had access to all of that. I think that was, that's definitely something, you know, that we need to think about for future if we continue to be with e-learning, because we don't really know where education is going right now.
That's true. That's true. Another barrier, one of the, it was in an American educator, that not every student had access to a computer. And that was one of the biggest challenge. Actually, I had someone in India as well, because I did a webinar in India to the Indian teachers. And one of the things is I was making assumption that the student had access to computers. And they had to remind me that there were some times that they were in remote areas that the student had no access to computers. So in a situation like that, what do you do?
I had a student in a situation, actually, luckily it was only one student. He didn't have his Chromebook with him because he was on vacation when it all kicked off. And he needed to use a computer. The country that he was in was not allowing Google Apps. So he really struggled. And in his situation, I had to email him separately with information, and I had to create something for him because he was not able to access Google Classroom or any of our Google things, because I don't know what the understanding was. But luckily, the senior management team at my school took care of that, because then they knew which students, there was only a handful of students who had no access to anything for any subject. And we tried to compile some work, put something together for them and see what they could do. Ultimately, where I am in the Middle East, the government is actually still discussing about how to catch up all the work, because some schools are luckier in terms of technology, but the local public schools, they don't have that level of technology. So any child who didn't participate in e-learning will have to go to school and catch up 1 month before schools actually open up here. So if schools open in September, then in August, we will be expected to run a catch-up session for a few students. However, if schools cannot open until October or November, then I don't know. We're waiting for the government to make a decision on how they would like things to move forward for students who've not been able to in any way participate in e-learning.
Whoa, that's interesting. Thank you. Christy, did you have any students that wasn't able to?
Yeah, there are a lot of them here who don't have access to computer. Families who may even have, and it's just one, just so you just imagine different things, and the parent also need to work online just with just one computer. So it's a challenge, and that's to mention that there are other families who don't even have any, people who are living in the very remote areas, like children who are in the public schools. Their parents can't even afford to get a PC. So obviously they're lagging behind, you can tell. And like Tiana said, it's going to be catch up for them when schools eventually reopen, for them to be able to meet up with what they have they've not been able to learn. So it's quite a challenge not having PC. Most people didn't envisage having this kind of situation where parents will have to make extra provision for their children to learn online and to be there to put them through. So it's a whole lot on the side of the kids. I can tell you, they're emotionally traumatized as much as they are educationally left behind. So a lot of things are just happening all at once.
Thank you. It's interesting. Just now the internet was lagging, right?
Yeah, so, I noticed.
A typical barrier.
Is it Kirsty who's lagging? Because my internet connection is unstable as well right now.
Yeah, I'm not too sure which one of us connection was all over the place. Could you imagine that you have all the students waiting and then you have all this, this big barrier and you're thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? It's a frustrating,
Right.
situation,
Yeah.
especially
It
now that
is.
so many people are now on this internet. That's a barrier we cannot overcome.
Yeah, another barrier I would like to mention is that the belief that kids of this age are internet compliant. This time really proved it wasn't really so, because you had kids who were just carrying phones about, carrying gadgets about, but they couldn't really, manipulate, these things, the softwares running some of these apps that they were using to, learn online. So they needed some, help, some form of guide from the teacher or from their parents, who would have also received guide from the educator in one way or the other. So it kind of exposed a lot of things. Kids might be going around with phones, but it's like what they really pretty know how to do much was just take pictures and then maybe go on social media or things like that. But they didn't really know that there was no, a way of telling that they could actually handle it when it came to, learning online. So that was another barrier. So you could see some of them fondling. I mean, where do I do this? Where do I do that? How do I type it? And where do I put in my comments, my feedbacks? As the teacher thought, in the virtual classroom. So all of this also, came to play. And I believe that kids too, besides the educators, should also be trained on how to learn virtually, because it's a two-way thing, actually.
That is so true. That was one of my rude awakening, because I assume because they're carrying this gadget around, they're young, they should know to. So true, Christy. There was zilch understanding in some cases to do the basic on the computer. And that was a rude awakening, because a lot of us thought that because they carry this gadget around, because they're always on it, we assume that they know how to use it. They didn't.
They didn't.
So not only did we have to try to teach ourselves, we also had to guide the students, as you rightly say, on how to maneuver through the computer and the packages on the computer. The interesting thing about it is some of them actually had, because, while I was at school, some of them actually had Teams. But because they wasn't using Teams, it's like when you say to them, put the assignment on Teams for me, they still didn't know how to do it. So when the situation arises, they become even more stuck, because they were not following your instruction while in the school. So when it came out, it was such a hassle for you as the educator, because you have to explain to them how to use Teams, which you should have known already when you started in September, because we went through Teams, but because you just couldn't be bothered and you relied so heavily on your phone, that when it's time to actually send the assignment on Teams, you didn't know what to do. So that was another major frustration.
Sure.
Okay. Another thing is, what are the on reflection, what have you learned from this whole situation in relationship to the whole host of barriers that we've actually experienced? Are there any way that we could have actually minimized the barriers, negotiate the barriers? That's one aspect. The other aspect is, what are the tips that you've actually got for your tool bags in relationship to moving on from this? So I've asked you two set of questions.
Okay. Well, one of the things I think, one of the tips would definitely be what I was saying about resources and sharing in advance, and then having the resources online for students to be able to access. That would make things easier for both sides. But one thing I think we haven't talked about as much was, teachers are so, and this is part of our job, we are so student-centered in our mindset. Everything we do is, how can we benefit the student? How can we help the student? And I think in all of this, in retrospect, I would say, as a piece of advice to any educators who are going through this right now or teaching online because of the circumstances, is look after your own mental health as well,
Right.
because
Yep.
you're working from home, and you start to lose that barrier of workspace, home space in your own space. And that can also be very stressful on you as a teacher, as an educator. So that's something I would say.
That is so very true, because even in the classroom, we forget about ourselves. Now we in the home, we forget even more about ourselves, because we're sitting on this computer just day in, day out, hours after hours, and you're just sitting there. You forget anything else, because, you know, the home life merges into the school life, as you rightly said, Tanya, and they all just come in one big packet.
That's true, very true. And in a bit to also overcome some of these barriers, I would think that some frequently asked questions or resources that parents might need to know ahead of time, because here, like I said, there are some schools that are still at home and then maybe probably might still go online, in weeks to come. So they might want to borrow a cue from this. I think what they should expect on the side of the parents and on the side of the children should be put together like a resource and sent to the parents ahead of time, so that they are better prepared and the kids also are better prepared. And another thing they should do as educators is to plan. It's not going to be so easy, but if you made plans, checked in with your advisor, checked in with the school administrator, checked in with your core workers or friends you have in your school or in your space, and then see what they are doing also, that will help you to uh, go ahead in whatever plans you're doing, and then establish your own schedules. Don't allow everything to be crowded. You can bring out space and say, okay, I'm going to be dedicating 2 hours or 3 hours, and make it consistent. Let it not be morning time and then tomorrow you're doing afternoon or something. Make it consistent in such a way. There are some schools where we're online, what they do is they teach the kids in the morning, say 2 or 3 classes, and in the afternoon, they're open to interactions. If the kids have some challenges, they can respond to it at the time. So making some plans ahead of time will help you as an educator to overcome some of these barriers and the stress that comes with it. Believe you me, when you are done with these kids, sometimes you're so overwhelmed, you are completely burned out. You don't want to do so, because your own mental health and your own physical health and your own emotional health is also very important before you can actually help another human being. So it's quite important that you put yourself in perspective, organize yourself, do some exercises, sleep well regularly, just have a sleeping schedule that works for you, and you'll be fine, I guess.
It's interesting, because we've now seen so many barriers that we had to overcome. And you know what? We've all overcame them one way or another. Because in the end of the day, we end up actually, as you said, Tanya, the students, we are so student-centered, student-focused, that we end up giving them what they need. It may not be everything they need, because there is no way we could actually give them everything that we would have given them in the classroom, but we've given them the best we know how under this condition. And we've done well. Let's not forget how well we have done. And we need to stop beating up ourselves that we have not done everything we're supposed to do. We've done everything we're supposed to do under this condition. Because when you have an internet lagging, when you have internet dropping, when you have internet not even cooperating, you cannot even have the internet, that's a really big challenge. There's nothing else you could do. There's sometimes you might plan to actually email the work to the student, but if you have no internet the day before you're messing up, you're stuck. Or in my case, there once, we've been having power cuts like 1 week and the next week, and the power cut would last for 3-4 hours. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, I've got so much things to do. That's another big issue. in situation is there's nothing you could do. You just have to think, okay, well, when you see them the next day, it's like apologizing and trying to give them so much more work. And sometimes they're really overwhelmed and they're confused at the same time. So it's a matter of judging it. This is a difficult one.
Yeah, I kind of agree in the sense that most of us didn't see this coming, but I still believe that if we planned, like I said earlier, and then make it very light and simple, give instructions and activities in small chunks, and then make sure you give the students feedback, because with that they stay motivated, they stay inspired, to continue. It's a big one on the kids. I must tell you, they're emotionally traumatized, not being able to even see their friends and socialize like they used to. So they kind of get distracted. Sometimes they are unable to, express themselves to their friends or even to you as much as they would have if they were seeing you. So all of this put together can, give us heads on, make sure you plan ahead of time, give the work in small chunks, and then give feedbacks. While on online classes, you could actually do what we call breakout session, where the children get to interact with themselves, not just you asking them questions and they responding or asking if they're following you, but you can leave like 5 minutes or so for the kids to interact, with themselves and see how that is coming along. Because obviously, by the time all these things are over and we're getting back to the school, we're not going to be doing the teaching first. We're going to be doing a lot of catching on, emotionally, mentally, socially, and things like that. So as it is, we are making do with what we have, but we can always, see how we control the barriers so that they don't become so overwhelming. We don't feel stressed out in the process. And then, of course, the parents can always play a role. They are our best bet now, because with their cooperation and with their help, communication with the kids becomes easier. You don't have to be the one to monitor if they're doing the assignments or signing in on the calls or not. They just are there to give you the support that you need to make it, easier for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And some teachers are parents as well. So half the time they are teaching their own kids, the other half they're teaching online. So,
yeah, that's true.
That is a challenge, because I have a 14-year-old.
yeah,
He should be doing his work. You know how much time it's like I have to leave, remind, remind. It's a real challenge. It's like one of my, someone who actually came, another educator came on the show, and she said, look, when she finished teaching, she's too tired to actually think about how she's going to support her child. And we as educators, that's where we're at, because it is tiring. So could you imagine, because you are trying to support them, but because you're a teacher, your support is so very different from if you were just a parent. If you were just a parent, you would just give the minimum, whatever is given. But because you're the parent and the teacher, there's a lot more expectation. It's like my son saying to me, oh, Mom, this is enough. No, it's not enough. Oh, well, me said that I didn't have to write so much. So it's like, it's a constant battle. It's a constant battle. And it's a tiring battle as well. Sure. That's the aspect that's forgotten. Some of us are parents and teachers.
Teachers at the same time.
Yeah. And you have to negotiate, the playing field. And it is not a level playing field.
It's not, actually.
It's not a level playing field.
It's not. A lot is actually expected from you as the educator, and then the pressure that comes with that, also having to put your kids, in line, is something else, because the society is looking at you, or you are an educator, so your child is supposed to be doing very well, and you're supposed to be, ahead of your game and all of those. So it comes with its own pressures, but I believe that teachers, I like to call them, they are superhumans with superpowers. I'm sure they are able to, organize things each and every time and then still come out smiling.
Yes, we do. You guys both know, having no choice. We have no choice. It's either sink or swim, and we cannot sink. We'll have to paddle or swim. That's it. You
Yeah.
know, very much what we'll do in the classroom. You know, you plan your lesson, and you know your lesson. When you do your lesson plan, you realize that that's not working. That lesson plan is not working, so you have no choice than to ad lib that. And you're thinking, okay, because it's either the students are lost, the lesson plan doesn't connect with the student, and you're thinking, okay, I need to abandon that. And you have to think on your feet. So we used to think in our feet all the time. No different.
No difference. Really, no difference. Sometimes it beats my imagination how people think that it's so easy to just walk into the classroom and then you have a bunch of kids right in front of you and you are able to, put them together. These are kids who have different backgrounds, religion, a different culture, upbringing, beliefs, a lot of things are different, and you're still able to put them together. You're still able to pass, the message across. You're able to relate with them one-on-one, and you're still able to manage their emotions, manage their feelings. A lot of them have some things they want to say to you, but they can't even say to their parents. So they feel very free to connect with you and to say. So it's a whole lot. We don't just teach, we connect, we advise, we advocate, we cheer, we congratulate, we do a whole lot of things. So putting all this together, for me, parents are beginning to see what amount of work teachers are doing there, the kind of sacrifice you have to make. And like Debbie said, once you get back home, you're not just completely off, you don't switch off, all right? You still have to check in with your own kids. You still do the teaching job, with them and see how they're doing. And then your mind is constantly running on what am I going to do tomorrow? And the lesson plan is like you said earlier, is no longer working. So you just throw that out of the window. You have to make an online plan that will meet with the demand that we have at hand. So a whole lot is happening in our world, and it's just amazing how teachers are able to put this together and still become teachers at work and still become parents at home.
Yeah, very true. Nicely summed up. Tanya, have you got anything to say to us?
I was just thinking that everything that Christy said right now is absolutely spot on. That's what it is. And I love the way she said the fact that, teachers, we're not just there teaching. We teach so much more than just teaching. We support our students, we encourage them, we are there for them, we help them grow. I mean, they spend most of their day with us at the end of the day. So, yes, they learn something at home, hopefully some manners and things, but ultimately we instill it. We are the ones that grow that and nurture the kids. So all of that, totally agree with you.
It's interesting though, because I had a few weeks ago, a parent say, "Oh, I don't understand why teachers are moaning. That's your job." Really? We know it's all, but there's sometimes most of the time we go over and beyond.
Exactly. It's when you stop going over and beyond that they realize that you were going over and beyond.
That's true.
And then they
Nice
become
said.
alive.
Yeah, it is so true.
Yeah,
because it is taken for granted. It is your job. Really? You're supposed to be disciplining your child. That's not my job to discipline the child, When the child comes to me, the child should know how to behave. I should be saying, sit on the chair and stop rocking the chair behind. I should have to be telling your child that. Your child should know how to sit on the chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's amazing. And the fact that we are all still in it, we have a passion for it. Or else we would have left already.
I think that's one of the things that keeps one going, the fact that you love the job and then you have this special connection with the kids. For me, I miss the whole thing. I miss not looking at the faces, like real life. I miss the smiles, and I miss the little, Miss Christy, could you help me with this? Could you help me with that?
Little annoying
stuff like that. I miss all of those. And that connection somehow makes you feel, out of this world, because it kind of brings some kind of fulfillment, knowing that you're helping these little ones, to chart, a good course for their lives. So it's a big one, and realizing you are in for it and then you're ready to do all the work is what just keeps us going when things go a little, overboard. But I'm thinking that parents are beginning to realize that, and after this pandemic, after everything have settled down, they'll begin to show teachers some respect and then begin to show some empathy, because it's like sometimes pointing, accusing fingers. You're not doing so much. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. And they just sit back there and not make their own contributions. But I think they're beginning to realize, now that teachers are really wonderful and they're doing so much in the lives of their kids.
Do you think, I had that impression once again, okay, maybe they've understood. Look, the human mind.
Don't rely on it.
Thank you. Exactly. Just give them 3 weeks to settle back to normal, and they start bashing us again.
Well, I agree with you. Humans sometimes are not to be relied on, but I think what's happening now is a major life transforming event. It didn't just happen only between parents and teachers, or children and teachers. It infiltrated into so many things, and I'm sure the way people think now and do things now are gradually beginning to change, and it's only my hope that they too will incorporate this change in the way they relate with teachers and the way they relate with their kids. For me, I've always believed that parents are supposed to be working in hand with the teachers of their kids. Prior to now, it's always been you do it. They bring every complaint to you, they bring every work to you, they want you to do everything. But now I'm sure, like I said earlier, they're beginning to realize the importance of being in the life of their children as regards their education, so they can even know what's happening. Some parents don't really know what's happening in the life of their kids. And by the time they realized it, a lot of things would have, a lot of water would have gone under the bridge. So now is the time to live up to the expectation. Parents are supposed to be the first teachers every child is supposed to have. Despite the fact that you still have to send them to school, but you are the first teacher at home. So if you leave your own work undone and you constantly expect the teacher to do it, well, the teacher would only do the much he or she can do, but be rest assured that your own role that you have left undone will definitely, play out in the future. So we don't want that. We want all around a kid that is well formed, both at home and in school, a child that can fit in the society, and become very responsible. We want children that will be able to chart, good course, for the future. So to me, it's for everyone. It's for the parents, it's for the teachers, it's for everyone in the society to rise up to the occasion at this point in time.
Thank you. Tanya, have you got anything else to say before I just wrap up?
No, we can wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, this clearly demonstrates the amount of barriers that teachers had to overcome in order to teach online. Some of the barriers they were able to overcome, some of them there were no overcoming, i.e. the internet. But you actually also show that how flexible and innovative and creative teachers had to be because they had no choice. You also demonstrate how really organized they had to be, even more organized than they would be in the classroom, because in the classroom you have the paper there, you just grab a set of paper and you just deal with it. Online you had no choice. You had to make sure that everything was ready so that when the students actually ready to do the work, they had work to do. Because one of the things is if you actually have to give them a pile of work for the next day, they become overwhelmed, they get lost, you don't get anything out of that student. So that really demonstrates a lot of factors. How we have no choice as educators. We love the job. We're not complaining. We love the job. But we're also showing that these are some of the challenges that we had to overcome, and we're still overcoming in order to do our online teaching. Remember, no one taught us that. We had to teach ourselves, and not only ourselves, we have to teach the students and also teach the parents. Because these students, 21st century students, we thought knew about technology. We've discovered that they don't. They only know how to take the pictures, switch on the phone, and all this to do with Instagram. That's their forte. They don't know anything else. Thank you very much, my educators, for coming online and sharing some of your challenges and some of your triumphs. Thank you very much for actually expressing how you feel. I would also like to thank my Facebook audience for being there. Tomorrow, I've got another set of educators who are going to be expressing some of the challenges, and more triumphs that they're experiencing on the online platform. The online platform is not normal. We see it as our new normal. It is not something that was in our textbook or in our training. It is something that we are learning on the job, and we're doing a fantastic job on it. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a fantastic evening, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.